Welcome. Excuse me. Make sure we cut that out. Welcome to episode 9 of ALS Matters. I'm your host, Cory Mosley. I am a genetic carrier and ALS patient with the SOD1 gene. Have a fairly extensive family history of ALS. And today we are joined by Tonya, the Managing Director of Care Services with the ALS Association. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So I'm very curious about care services because I'm sure that the definition of that is very broad. But to start off with, can you kind of briefly introduce yourself and discuss, kind of what led you to work with ALS Association?
Yes, and we can talk all about care services because I joined the team in 2019. And most of my background professionally has been working with families dealing with trauma and how they can tap into resiliency and offering resources and support. So in 2019, at that time, I was brought in to create a caregiver program in Texas. We were doing a really, really good job of caring for those living with ALS, and yet it's not an individual diagnosis. Every family member is involved in some way. So I was really drawn to the ALS mission. My husband is a Navy veteran. And when I was talking to him about this opportunity, he said, veterans are twice as likely to get ALS. I didn't even know that at the time. But I was drawn to the blank canvas of so many things, the awareness, the resources, the support, the focus on, and even naming trauma and helping to navigate and tap into resiliency. So that's really what our care services team does on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, I've been interested in kind of following a lot of the ALS influencers, if you will, for lack of a better term. And there's been a lot more focus, it seems like, on caregiver mental health and things like that, which, having seen a lot of my family members go through that was something that was never really talked about when I was younger. Even when my mother was going through her battle with ALS, like, we never really, between me, my sister, my stepdad, we never really had conversations like, hey, how are you doing? It was all focused on her, and you just kind of, dealt with it in your own way. And for me, after she passed, it was not a healthy way to deal with it. It was, alcohol. So what are some of the things that, kind of high level that you're trying to do with caregivers specifically?
Yeah, that's a great question. And again, a lot that we do, it goes, we have education, like specifically, the caregiver education courses for the hands-on things, transitions. I can't tell you the number of times in the last, 6 years, I've talked to caregivers who said, yeah, I YouTubed how to do a transfer. So there's the real hands-on logistical things that their skills training. And then, like you said, the mental health and the caregiver, support groups over the years, it's talking to caregivers. And let's be honest, friends living with ALS that said, okay, we know what we're dealing with physically. We hear that, but can we talk about how ticked off I am? I'm mad. Yeah. And let's talk about that. So the emotional well-being, and taking care of yourself as a caregiver. That includes nutrition, exercise, and I don't have time for that. You've got to make time or you're not going to be able to care for the person you love.
Right.
So it's talking through all that, giving safe spaces to be honest for everybody, because your experience is different than your experience, but they're both valid. So let's talk about it.
Right. And there's something I've noticed with a lot of the folks that I've connected with over the last year is kind of you might not be in this spot yet, but here are some things you can be thinking about before you get there, right? Wherever you're at in your progression path, right? There's a lot of tips and tricks you can get from other patients that have made a difference for me personally.
Yeah, for sure. And in the support groups, individuals will, to your point, hold up, this is my coffee cup, but hey, this is the pill crusher I've used, and here's where you can get it on Amazon.
Right.
Or here's something I do here just for my own sanity each day. And we also have now a national Spanish support group, which we are thrilled to have, so that we're reaching as many people as we can in our community.
Yeah, absolutely. You touched on resiliency a little bit. And I know you're very passionate about having purpose and being resilient. Kind of what led you to finding those two things and being passionate about both of those topics?
Yeah, you see, I've got my slinky here. It's not just a fidget, but I'm gonna use it today. So you know what a slinky is, don't you?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Okay, I've got a 14-year-old son, and when I first showed him this when he was about 5, he's like, "A what?" And I was like, "Oh my gosh, we've got to talk about the greatness of a real slinky that'll go."
Oh yeah,
down
the
the
metal
stairs.
one. Yes, I used to play with them all the time.
So this one's not a metal one, but I keep this because I'm always and I keep it at my desk about purpose and resiliency. So for me, and I think probably for everybody, if we're being honest, you are kind of forced to focus on purpose when you're going through those deepest, darkest hours of your life. You know, we all have them and they look differently, but when you're like, how am I going to get what I don't even know what to do next. And if you aren't grounded in your purpose, you're just gonna flap around. And so this is my purpose slinky. And it reminds me that life gets really twisted all the time. And like I said, the metal ones go back together a lot better. But when you're grounded in purpose, you get back to the slinky, the spiral. Now, the spiral always has plateaus. Sometimes you're rocking along and you're in a groove, you know, things, okay, got this. But something happens and it knocks us off the plateau. And sometimes right on our behinds. It could be big things. It could be a new job. It could be moving. Sometimes we choose, but they're always there. So for me, it was the things that I didn't necessarily choose that happened to me. And I didn't know how I was going to get through it. But I thought, there's something bigger than this. And it was a perspective shift for me of why is this happening for me and not to me? And that's a big, big shift that allows you to tap into resiliency. So for me, that's where it started.
That's really interesting. And I say that because of my personal story that kind of led to where we are now. I don't think I've told this story yet, but I'd gotten the opportunity to go to a UFC event with one of my best friends from college.
I love UFC, by the way. We didn't talk about that.
Oh, nice. I'll show you my jacked up ear here.
Get out.
So we got a chance to go to UFC and we got to meet some fighters and do some things that were really cool. And it was about a week after I found out that Qalsody treatments were working. I found out I won this trip through like an online raffle kind of thing. Right. And several of the folks that we met, we were talking about life and things like that. And we get back to the hotel after the fights and I couldn't go to sleep. I may have slept for about an hour, woke up just very emotional. And I'd kind of doom spiraled a little bit. Like, why am I the person that got to go to this thing? Why am I the ALS patient that gets Qalsody? You know, why is it showing that it's actually working when some other folks can't take it because they've had reactions to it? And I woke my buddy up and I was like, hey man, I need you to talk with me for a little bit. He said, what's going on? And I just kind of spiraled. I went through my entire life history, right? Like if this thing hadn't happened and this thing hadn't happened, then this wouldn't have happened. And then we shot a post video with the company that sent us out there. And Tanner with the ALS Association saw it and invited me to the Nexus conference last year. And it has been, for me personally, a really great experience in the last year doing all, ALS Matters, doing, getting to go to the Nexus conference, meeting the other patients that have been out there. Like I knew folks in my family that have had ALS, but I'd never met anyone else with it up to that point. And it is, I can see how a slinky would be a great way to, visualize that, because it is a wild journey and there are a ton of ups and downs. I mean, the 3 months after my diagnosis, I was in a dark place.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's that mental health aspect that we don't always talk about. And you know what? I'm pretty sure that when you were in that dark place dealing with everything ALS, other things were happening too. And that's the whole life spiral. It didn't stop.
No, I mean, I still had work, still had a daughter, still had a wife, still had, still had to mow the yard.
The sink still gets, needs to be fixed. I mean,
yeah. So on the topic of resiliency, what does it mean when you're helping support these patients living with ALS?
Not only do I work with the greatest colleagues, we have a team that I help guide that's 13 team members. And we have, this year we've helped walk alongside almost 2,000 families. So I think that's the first thing in resiliency, is providing a hub of resources and support in every way, kind of the things that we've talked about. But equipment loans, are you connected to a clinic? Because those are all contributors to resiliency. Support groups, I mean, everything. It's making sure that all the families know about our resources and support internally, and then being a connector, a hub of external resources. Who are the collaborators and partners that are doing things well that can help support you too? Because we can't do everything, none of us, right, but we can connect. And I think doing the work that I do, again, allows me to tap into to my purpose of, we all have unique gifts. So for me, like I said, my professional career has been involved in healing wounds and building relationships, and I'm able to do that. I get to meet individuals like you. I meet the most incredible humans. I mean, just 5-star human beings in the work that I do that are tapping into resiliency every day. I listened to Mikey Stone's conversation with you. His whole conversation was about purpose. Yeah. And he talked about how it was really born from desperation, and it turned into something beautiful. And if that's not resiliency, I don't know what is.
Yeah, it's something I've actually spoken to him a couple of times since that interview. And it's something that I kind of connected with as it relates to, doing this kind of stuff, because, go back to that UFC fight. I was sitting in that hotel room, just bawling my eyes out, like feeling so much guilt about being able to be on Calzati, being able to take this trip, like all these different things. And I kept telling my buddy, like, I've got to do something with this. I have no idea what it's going to be or what it's going to lead to, but I've got to do something. And, a year later, here we are.
Yeah. And you're using your gifts. You are perfect examples. And there's many of the examples. You're a perfect one right now today of, no matter what I'm going through, there's a fundamental need to know what is my purpose and what are my gifts and how am I going to use it?
Yeah. Evidently running your mouth is really easy for people. Case in point.
I share that one with you. So
yeah. I could talk to anybody and look what I'm doing now. Right. Yep. So what does a day in the life look like in your role with the ALS Association, and how are you bringing in this purpose and resilience in a day-to-day fashion?
Yeah, great question. Like I said, there's a wonderful team I get to help guide and support, and they are just intimately involved with everybody, those living with ALS and family members, to provide those resources and support. I'm helping to ensure that we are, increasing the awareness and visibility, not just of ALS as a disease, but those resources and support. Anybody that is living with ALS has got to know about everything that's available to them. It literally breaks my heart if somebody is a year, let's just say any point in the diagnosis, and said, "Oh, I didn't know you had an equipment loan program. I didn't know there was a clinic next to me." That's just not acceptable. So it's making sure that those resources and support are shared. It's really helping to guide the team with a growth mindset. Where are we going to be a year from now, 5 years from now? It's focused on clinic access and utilization. That's a really big part of the work that I do, making sure that we are reaching, rural areas, underserved communities, those who are underinsured or not insured at all, again, so they can have the same access to those resources and support, and not shying away from the tough conversations. The hope is anybody can call us anytime and be real. If you need to cuss for 10 minutes, if you need to yell, if cry, laugh, laughter is a big part of it. If you can't laugh,
yes,
but it's
it
all
is.
those things.
I will say that is something I've noticed very quickly with the folks I ran into at Nexus last year, is the sense of humors are priceless.
Yeah, you have to. And that's part of resiliency too.
And it's not always easy either, right? There are days where it's very hard to laugh, but I'll give you an example. The other day, particularly rough day, I just got done or getting ready to go get the next Qalsody treatment. I was talking to one of my friends on the ride in to drop my daughter off at school, and she is a character. And we are pretty free with our language at home. And so she's picked up bits and pieces here and there, right? And like I said, I'm on the phone with my best friend. She jumps out of the car and she goes, "All right, I'll see you later. Bye, Dave." And then she stops. She's getting ready to shut the door, and she's like, "Later, B words," and just shuts the door. Maybe she literally said B words, but everyone, on the phone
knew what she was talking
exactly
about.
what she was talking about. And I mean, it's, that's hilarious. I don't care who you are. That's funny.
It is. It's hilarious. And you have to laugh. And you talked about what does it look like in a day when you're talking to a wife, to a husband, to a kid. I mean, anybody. It's, well, this happened. I was trying to do a transfer and lift him up, and we ended up falling on the bed, or we ended up, and we just laughed, or we made it a dance, or whatever. And if you can't do that, it makes it so much harder. I think it's just critical to that survival and resiliency.
Yeah, I definitely agree. A dark sense of humor and terminal illness go well together. What's one thing you wish, outside of like a new patient or the resources you guys have, like what's something you wish that everyone knew about ALS?
Oh gosh, that's a great question. So if I was talking to somebody and they knew nothing about ALS,
what's the first thing you'd want them to know?
This is bringing in that sense of humor to that too, but you don't have to yell when you're talking to them.
The problem's in my nerves, not my ears.
Yes, they are not deaf,
Right.
And there was a lady at Texas Neurology Clinic that was talking about that sense of humor, handing out buttons. And I think I've got one in my bag that I take to clinic. And she wore it and wanted us to wear it that said, "I have ALS, you don't have to yell." And I loved it because
that's great.
So I think that, and it does come up, it could be out with family or whatever, but that would be one thing. Like, seriously, let's really talk about what we're talking about here. And then I would talk about the other stuff that they would ask, the stats, and, can I get it? Is it contagious? Then we would talk about all those things.
Yeah, no, that's pretty good. We need to bring those buttons back.
I know, right?
I would expect to see some of those at the Nexus conference.
Ooh, I think I can make that happen.
So what gives you hope in your kind of day-to-day care services role?
There's so much. Like I said, just the individuals I meet every day gives me hope. Hearing stories, hearing purpose, research gives me hope. Of course, right now, you talked about your, Qalsody, your treatments, what we're reading, what we're hearing, what from you gives me hope. And knowing how much is in the pipeline. Those are big. The clinics, getting more and more ALS clinics with specialized, treatment providers, more awareness out there where we're hopefully and seeing progress, but it's not a year and a half to diagnosis. It's got to be quick where neurologists are saying, wow, I think we need to test for this, not 25 other things, and then let's try this.
Right. Yeah. I can't remember what I was reading the other day talking about like early testing of NFL levels to help, diagnose possibly, but I'd definitely be interested to know kind of what the statistics are around how early on your NFL levels spike prior to, nerve damage, essentially.
Yeah, for sure.
So I think we're both going to be at the Nexus conference. Is that correct this year?
Yay! Yes, with some buttons. You've
With some
inspired
buttons.
me. We're gonna have some buttons. Yeah.
You don't have to yell. That's funny. What's one of the things you're looking forward to with the Nexus conference this year?
I saw it. I don't remember where. It was on social media, and I would love to give credit to where it originated from. But it said, put a note in your phone that says, good things are always happening to me. And I've done that. I do that, and be intentional in adding something to it every day. Nexus is a whole bunch of good stuff. So I'm excited about it. There's going to be a lot for us to make notes of. We talked about research, clinicians. It's global. I go back to, again, Mikey really, so much of what he said just resonated with me and just inspired me. But he said, I started doing this, and I'm paraphrasing, but he goes, I started doing this because I thought, is there anyone else out there feeling the way that I am? Nexus connects you with everyone, and you're not alone. It's real easy in the ALS journey to get on what I call isolation island. And it's real hard to get off of there.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good point, because right after I was diagnosed, I had a younger cousin who's a year younger than me, got diagnosed about a month or two later. And I think I'm the first or second person in mine in his generation to be diagnosed. And I remember when he got diagnosed, he called me, and I was like, I really feel bad about feeling this way, but there's a part of me that is glad that you also have it, because we were very close as children. And now I have someone to go through this with who I'm already very close to. And I know that makes me sound like a terrible human being, but I would much rather him not have it. Right.
Right.
But if anyone was going to, I'm kind of glad it was him.
Yeah.
That sounds terrible to say.
No, that's the part of just isolation. But I think, again, connecting, whether it's clinicians in a community, there's strength in numbers. We're better and stronger together. None of us were meant to do life alone. And, to your point, when it's somebody or you don't know, it's like, hey, I'm not by myself. Others get this.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely been, it's funny. We seem to be in opposite places every couple of weeks. We'll talk to each other, and at a minimum, and hey, how are you doing? I've been a little down. Well, I've actually, I've felt pretty good, but he's been a little down, or it'll switch back and forth. It's wild how cyclical it is.
But you're able to lift each other up a little bit, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely been. And then shortly after him, we had another cousin that was diagnosed. Mike, they were the first two guests on the podcast, and it's wild to just have a very close circle of family that you can always go to about different things. And it definitely seems like it takes a village to get through life, right?
Yeah, 100%.
So what's something else you're looking forward to at Nexus besides the camaraderie and bringing all the folks together?
I think, and now it's probably my turn to say this may be selfish, but it fills my cup. I go there, there's just, it fills the tank of, this is why we're doing what we're doing.
Refills your purpose jar.
Yes, exactly. And so I need it. I need to just pause and hear all the good stuff that's happening, talk to people who are sharing stories, literally talk to heroes every day that say, you know what, this is why I'm doing what I'm doing.
Love it. Well, I think that's all the questions we have. So I want to thank you for coming on, and I'm looking very forward to meeting you at the Nexus conference this year. And
I can't wait.
And for any of the new listeners out there, please, if you would like to come to the Nexus conference, go to alsnexus.org, register there. There should be the resort information, all that kind of stuff on the same page. It is a great time. I had a blast last year, and I highly expect to have a blast this year. I'm sure there'll be plenty of information handed out as there was the prior year. There's a ton of research conversations, ton of caregiver stuff. I mean, it was my first time going to anything like this, and it kind of hooked me on these kind of things. And it did me very well meeting other people in this situation who had maybe a more positive outlook than I did at the time. And like, definitely, I feel like gave me a lot of part of this purpose we've been talking about in resilience, being able to continually connect with those folks who are always encouraging no matter what you're going through. So please join us at the Nexus conference.
That's so true. And Cory, I think you said something too that reminds me, you're around people who are fountains and not drains.
Yes. You would think what was counterintuitive is I was expecting a terminal illness convention, right? That's what I was expecting. And to walk into that first night's little circle of ALS patients and listen to the laughter and even the heartbreaking stories that sit there and make you cry, right? There's always a twist of joke at the end or something like that, and people finding, happiness where they can, and being able to, process through all these super fun emotions. It's definitely I highly recommend it. I'll leave it at that.
Yes, and I want for everybody that's listening, this year's, if you've not gone to alsnexus.org and taken a look at the agenda, you can attend in person, and I'd love to see you. I've got a bucket of Slinkies I'm going to bring too, and now that I'm thinking about it. But I'd love to see you in person, but you can join virtually. And like I said, there's the research, presentations, there's the clinical aspect of it. But there are panels, or there's a focus on the caregiver experience too. So I don't want anybody watching or listening to think, oh, this is not for me. It's for you. It's for each one of us.
Yeah, I think anyone that joined virtually, I think even my stepmother watched a few panels last year and was texting me during them like, oh, I just watched this. Were you sitting in on this one? Like things like that. And it's definitely worthwhile. I got a ton of information. I learned a ton of things that I didn't know before I went. So it's definitely worth the time.
Yes. And I can't wait to see you there, and you and I can talk more UFC, Slinkies, UFC. I am ready. Just as a side note, for Dustin Poirier's last fight. That's all I'm going to say.
All I'm going to say, he's fighting Holloway, right?
Yes. In July.
Yeah, I like both of those fighters. I was at UFC 300 when Holloway knocked out Gaethje.
Oh my gosh.
That's a fight I really want to watch. I'm very excited about that one myself.
Yeah. So we'll have to talk about that. All right.
Yeah, I'm down. Thanks everyone for joining today. As always, leave a comment, like, share, subscribe. ALS Matters is here to try to get as much information out as we can about ALS and everything associated with it. So I want to thank you, Tonya, for joining us today. And thank y'all.
Yeah. Thanks, Cory. Bye, everybody.